Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here on this beautiful spring day. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to not the first, not the second, not the fourth, not even the seventh, but the 10th annual Transboundary Water Symposium. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the patriarch of the Transboundary Water Symposium, Ali Rekas, with some opening words.
Thank you. Apologize. I'm Israeli and I'm Jewish. When I hear patriarch, I think about the tomb of patriarchs in Hebron. So, thank you, sir. So yes, it's a pleasure to welcome you all to the landmark 10th anniversary symposium, Water Security in Israel, the Middle East and Africa, Regional Solutions for the Climate and Water Crisis. I'll be brief, partly because we have a full agenda, and partly because I've been allotted exactly 4 minutes to summarize 10 years of intensive, Sarah, strategic collaboration between the Center for Water Research and the Israel Innovation Project. Trying to distill a decade of academic. Oh, I should put that.
I'm so sorry. Are we hearing in the back?
No.
A bit.
Okay.
What should I do?
Speak loudly.
Yeah.
So, trying to distill a decade of academic ventures spanning desalination, wastewater reclamation, the delicate diplomacy of transboundary water security into a few minutes is a notable, quote unquote, hydrological compression, to use the language of this gathering this afternoon. But this partnership is too substantial to pass without acknowledgement. It has been the flagship of our collaboration and is the bedrock upon which today's session is built. The Israel Innovation Project was founded to foster this exact kind of deep technological exchange between Northwestern and Israel's world-leading water ecosystem. For a decade, we have provided scaffoldings that turn these ambitious ideas into premier model of international academic cooperation. This pillar has led to multiple faculty exchanges, joint research projects, and undergraduate class, now also in its 10th year on, and I believe some of the students are here, right? Yes, capture audiences for 10 years. A global track to Israel that has provided undergraduate students an opportunity to explore wastewater treatment, water desalination facilities, the birthplace of drip irrigation innovation, and more. While it's gratifying to see this conversation grow and attract new partners as the years evolve, and as the flyers inevitably become more crowded, the core of our success remains this foundational 10-year commitment to rigorous academic exchange. As Northwestern University looks towards its next phase of international collaboration, Israel included, we are exploring ways to significantly scale our academic ties. While these plans are still in their formative stages, the success of the last 10 years serves as a primary evidence of what is possible globally. So, to sum up this point, we aren't just celebrating the past decade, we are viewing the cornerstone of a much larger institutional vision for Northwestern University's global impact. So before I move to introduce the speaker, a thank you note. First, to the Water Center team, Emma, Vanessa, the grad students, and of course, the co-directors, Aaron and Sarah. And in particular, if I may, to Miss Crystal Falcaro Heaps. Where are you, Crystal? Crystal, we've been working together for a long time. Simply put, you're the pivotal pillar of our success. Thank you. So, I'm honored to introduce our next speaker. Dean Brian Brayboy leads Northwestern CESP School of Education and Social Policy. Beyond his deanship, he is the Carlos Montezuma Professor, a member of the National Academy of Education, and just now, 3 weeks ago, am I correct, sir? Yes. Was just as if it was time to this event. He was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. The renowned scholar whose work focuses on the intersection of sovereignty, power, and education. His expertise in how knowledge serves the public good and respects community history, and how it is essential to how we think about the real-world impact of the scientific breakthroughs we discussed today. So, dear audience, please join me in welcoming Dean Brayboy. Thank you.
So much.
No.
May I use this? Thank you, and congratulations on 10 years. I'm trying not to have too much interference here. Thanks for having me. I'm going to say just a few words. I have a habit sometimes of getting into trouble with whatever it is I say. It's never intentional. I'm actually pretty Pollyanna-ish about the world. I want to say a bit about Northwestern and water, and then just offer a few comments as I've been thinking about water more broadly, and larger questions about what it means to be transboundary in terms of water. Northwestern, as many of you all know, is the only Research One institution on a Great Lake. There are 5 Great Lakes, and they comprise 20% of the world's fresh water, which feels really important to me at the moment in terms of how we think about Northwestern's place and our role in research, but also just general engagements with Lake Michigan, which, as you all know, is the only Great Lake entirely in the United States. So when we think about water security and transboundary issues, it also goes across many different states. And so it becomes a really interesting issue. But Lake Michigan and its watersheds are important for a whole bunch of reasons. There is a long history, almost a millennium of a history, that suggested indigenous peoples from lands across the lake would come to Chicago and meet for trade, for commerce. Often love came into play, and so people who were here in canoes would go back with 1 or 2 extra people, and there was a trading of people and relationships, which is really important. The scientific work here is fantastic. I would also just say to you that I think we are on the cusp of some really remarkable opportunities here in terms of thinking about Lake Michigan as a pedagogical partner for this institution. When I first got here, I said to my colleagues, what role does the lake play other than beautiful photos of the university with Chicago in the background? And they looked at me like I was a knucklehead, and admittedly I am. But it strikes me that the opportunity to engage the lake as a partner in our learning at this world-class institution with world-class researchers is something I hope we will begin to take on. quick few thoughts about water and why the questions of boundary become important. I would argue that water is a human right. It is nature's gift to the planet, and I hope that we will find ways to treat it with a real sense and spirit of abundance, even as we think seriously about the importance of having it and its security. And so for me, abundance and scarcity in relationship to one another is a really important piece for us to begin to think about in the work. And I often wonder why we bound it for some people. And what do we do with the moment in terms of opening possibilities of relationships up with other people? It's abundant. Fresh water isn't always abundant, but water itself is abundant. There is a singular ocean on this planet. We've decided to divide it up, and I understand why we divide the ocean up. You can see the chemistry of oceans. I've always been amazed when I went in Cape Town and I see where the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean come together and the difference in colors and sort of what happens in that moment. So I don't deny the fact that there are different bodies of water within a single ocean, but I think it's important to really think about the interconnected nature of water. Water's interdisciplinary. We study it through interdisciplinary needs, through methods, through ideas. I hope we'll keep doing it, but it's also interdisciplinary in its forms. We can drink water, we can bathe in it, we can sail on it, we can swim in it. Sometimes it's hard, whether it's ice or snow. It's transitory. It goes from frozen to wet or unfrozen. It shows up in fog. It shows up in all kinds of different ways. And I'm struck by the transboundary nature actually of the chemistry of water and how it shows up. Water's chemical. As I understand it, there are 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. You all should know, like, I'm an education scholar. I don't really know anything about water. But I also think it's chemical in terms of what it does for our relationships with each other. And for me as a social scientist who is interested in relationships between peoples and places, between peoples and ideas, it strikes me as a really important thing to imagine that water has the ability to chemically bring us together or drive us apart. We have some choices in this, and I'm not naive enough to not think about the larger consequences of why we need water security and why there's a focus on it. I'm also hopeful enough to think that there are ways for us to imagine it. I sail as part of the Polynesian Voyaging Society, which is a canoe organization based in Honolulu, Hawaii. It uses traditional navigational methods to sail on a 62-foot double-hulled wooden canoe, and I've sailed the Pacific Ocean on this, and I can tell you that water connects us in really profound ways. And when you are in a 62-foot canoe in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you realize simultaneously how small you are and how fundamentally connected you are. And I hope we will grab some of those ideas as we begin to think about this. And then the last piece I'll say is that I am struck by the fact that, as I've said, water is relational. It's also reciprocal. I think about the cycles of water and how it goes from the lake into the air and back to earth into the lake in a way that is really important. It gives us life. Sometimes it takes life away from us, but the reciprocal nature of water is pretty powerful. I want to say again to you all, congratulations on 10 years. I'm really looking forward to learning from you all today and appreciate the opportunity to say a few words.
Well, let's appreciate Dean Brayboy one more time for that other take.
So it's my honor and pleasure to welcome up Dr. Aaron Salzberg, who has done a thing or two with transboundary issues, both in his capacity as head of water at the Department of State and also in his role as the head of the UNC's Water and Health Institute. He's on to new and exciting things, but for now we have tasked him with giving us some context on transboundary issues globally understood. Please welcome Aaron Salzberg.
Is this the best way to do this? First, I want to thank the dean, and he used the word, well, actually, it's really intimidating being in front, it's always intimidating in front of academics. I am a diplomat, and I know you count things by how your publications, PNAS science and all of that. Just to say some of my own street cred, I've been published in Glamour magazine, which exceeds all the scientific journals added up together. So if you want to throw down, I'm ready. I want to thank the dean. He mentioned the word transboundary a number of times, and I do want to emphasize the fact when we talk about boundaries, it's not just transboundary the way you think about it, crossing a political border. We're talking about crossing sectoral borders, political borders, geographic borders, right? So it's really a boundary problem in lots of different dimensions. And it's really an exciting thing to work on and to think about. But I do want to address one of our common myths right up front that probably is going to be the back of our conversation. And that's the idea, and we've all heard this narrative, that the wars of the future will be fought over water. That climate change, water leads to drought, which induces stress, which leads to conflict. That's not true. The fact is that while this is it's both an interesting and intuitively idea that resonates with all of us. We all think it must be true. And while it's a politically convenient narrative, the facts just don't back it up. And why is that the case? First, freshwater insecurity is almost always the result of mismanagement driven by politics and poorly functioning institutions. And so it's important to reflect on that, right? It's not just about water scarcity itself. That's not the issue. There are many water poor. We all know many countries that are water poor that do a very good job at meeting their needs. At the same time, we know many water rich countries that do a very poor job of meeting their needs. So there isn't a correlation between the amount of water that you have and whether or not people have access to those resources. The Syrian civil war was not caused by a drought. It was caused by the government's response to a drought. So it's the politics that we have to think about when we talk about this. And it's about those human experiences, as Sarah will be fond of telling us, it's this human experiences with water. The second reason why this narrative of water insecurity leads to stress, leads to conflict doesn't work is that the major conflicts that we see over water are not really about water at all. They're about power, security, sovereignty, identity, and water actually becomes part of that tactical domain in which those issues can be thought about or brought to bear. And so it's a different way of thinking about how water plays into conflict. And you can think about this when you see the recent abdication of India from the Indus Waters Treaty, or the 16-year history over the GERD, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. These issues are not about water. It's easy for us to say that, but that's not what they're about at all. The final flaw in this narrative is that it's actually hard to win a war over water. You can imagine that you might be able to do something that could destabilize the relationship between countries over water in the short term, but to win a water war, you probably have to secure those resources, and that's not an easy thing to do. And in fact, when you look across the world, most of the basins that we're talking about, the downstream country, which is often the most marginalized in that water relationship, is often subject to an upstream hegemon. And so, right, Syria, Iraq are not going to go and attack Turkey. Why? Because they would lose that war. And that's the case in many of these types of basins. And so the power dynamics that surround many of these basins also lead you to a position where you don't see conflict. And in fact, that's why historically we haven't seen many wars over water. It's an incredibly rare thing. It just almost never happens. And cooperation is more often the rule. Now, just to be clear, this isn't to say that there isn't an uptick in water conflicts. Certainly, we are seeing more conflicts at the local level. And we are seeing water becoming more used as a weapon in conflict and a target of conflicts. And we saw this, in fact, when ISIS was moving through into Iraq and into Syria. They went down the Tigris and they went down the Euphrates. The reason was they wanted to seize the control points of that river system so that they could dictate who did and didn't have water for either food purposes or for energy purposes. In fact, they captured dams to sell the power to generate revenue for their own operations. All right, so water became a weapon within that conflict. And of course, we've seen this in Ukraine, and even our current president has hinted at the idea of targeting water infrastructure. But in general, despite the fact that we haven't seen conflicts over water in the past, this may not necessarily be a good indicator of what's going to happen in the future. And so there are a number of factors that I often look for to see whether or not we may have problems and a basin or a series of countries that we have to worry about. The first is that idea of water stress. That does matter. And it isn't just about the availability of water, though. It really is about this balance between supply and demand and whether or not human needs are actually being met in a legitimate way. That's the key factor to look at. The second is poor data. Many of the basins that we talk about really lack the data that they need to inform sound decision-making. And without that data, you often see a mythology begin to develop around transboundary basins. In fact, if you go to almost any basin, you'll hear the downstream country complaining that the upstream country is polluting the water, or they're diverting the water, they're taking water out of the system. These things are not necessarily rooted in facts or rooted in data. And without good facts and data, especially in an age of mis and disinformation, right, a narrative can develop that is not reflective of the actual truth. And that can make it very difficult to reach agreements on water. There are often very legitimate competing interests. Certainly, this is the case in the Nile. Ethiopia has a very legitimate interest in generating power for its people. Many people in that country don't have access to 24/7 power. But at the same time, there are legitimate interests in Sudan and in Egypt in having water to be able to grow food and to meet their basic needs. And having these very legitimate competing interests can often lead to framing these problems as zero-sum games. And that can be a very difficult negotiating dynamic to try to solve. It's also very challenging when you may be able to articulate some of these interests, but a lot of the problems that we see in transboundary basins are actually emergent from this interaction of very complex systems, not just hydrologic systems, but again, hydrologic systems, environmental systems, political systems are all interacting, trade, all these things are interacting in ways that can be affected by these transboundary relationships, and it can be very difficult to hold a negotiation in that space. The other thing that often gets my attention, 1 minute? Okay, then I will skip over. The lack of institutions. If you don't have functioning institutions, that's something that gets my attention and I worry about. Unilateral development. Countries that start developing the river without consulting the other partners, that's a problem. And of course, any sort of existing animosities. Last, of course, is the failure of diplomacy. There are lots of different ways countries can respond to these problems. Diplomatically, you try to resolve it by talking to each other. Politically, you can put pressure, or kinetic or covert conflict. So there's lots of different ways, and I do worry when diplomacy fails. The major point I really did want to make, though, is more than I really do believe that we can build, and the dean was getting at this point towards the end, I do believe we can build a better, more stable, more resilient future through water. Not because everybody needs water and all that, and I think we know that, but because the process of solving water problems builds our understanding and creates a set of shared values of the world around us. It strengthens our appreciation for science and data and how we can use science and data to come to collective decision-making when there's a great deal of uncertainty. It reinforces the idea that the problem-solving process never ends, right? This idea that we can solve water is not true. Water is not a disease that you cure. Water is something we have to do every single day, forever and ever, ensuring the sustainability of these services. It's a process. It's a way of working. It's a way of life. And so in the end, water can really bring all of us together, and it forces us to work in ways that integrate science, that build relationships, strengthen social cohesion, reinforces democratic values, and the processes that in the end make us all more productive, more peaceful, and more resilient.
Thanks very much. Every time I hear Aaron talk, I learn things. That was wonderful. It's now my honor to welcome Dr. Ishmael Shaye to the stage. So many of you may know that we're in the midst of a historical visit from a Kenyan delegation from the Ministry of Water and the Office of the President. We are honored to have not one, not two, not three, but 5 delegates. Delegates, could you just please wave and let us appreciate you? One of the delegates is missing. That's the minister himself. As important as our Transboundary Water Week is, the president of Kenya has a little more clout than we do, and he called the minister to some urgent business. But it is a great pleasure to hear some remarks from someone who also knows a lot about Transboundary, and that's Dr. Ishmael Shaye from the Office of the President.
First of all, to qualify, even besides the education that one will sit in this kind of auditorium and take a class, why qualify to speak about water? I remember growing up in my village. We used to live 3 miles from River Tana. I come from, if I was to give you a picture, Americans like pictures, but I'll draw for you a picture. I come from the northern side of Kenya. And if you're familiar with that terrain, we border Lamu, 45 minutes from Lamu, an hour and a half from Malindi. Those are famous cities. That's why and you can even Google as I speak. But there was a scarcity of water. So my mother will walk me to the river because we did not have enough. I will shower while she's washing my clothes. I'm just giving you a picture of how I grew up and why I'm very passionate about this subject. I will shower, and I think I will shower twice or thrice while she's washing my clothes to dry up. And then I will walk back with her. Remember, tomorrow is Monday, and I'm going to school. The water she has from that bucket, I can only use a cup to wash my face and maybe brush my teeth. And I'm good to go until next weekend. Somebody will ask, what was the logic behind that for my mother to walk me and sweating back? Because I could not, ride on her back because she was also carrying water on my clothes. So when it comes to this subject, Prof, I go beyond this boundary. I remember being given the opportunity to become the CEO for the water sector in Kenya, which I took it very serious. Transversed Kenya to make sure that I was able to implement project. You can imagine having lived that life. I didn't have any experience, but I'll give you a small story of what transpired. I went to Indiana State University. I ended up finishing my first undergrad at University of Minnesota and my first master's in natural resource management hydrology. I did not have enough in the water sector, so I said, I'm going to the best school that I know, which was Vermont Law School, where I did the law aspect of water before going back home to do my PhD and validating my education to where it is today. My first interview when I landed in Kenya was with an organization called UNDP, which you're familiar with. And I remember I was supposed to have been, if I got the position, the coordinator for the Nile Basin Initiative. I'm giving you that background so that you see where I'm coming from. I remember we did several tests, and then in the interview process, somebody asked me about my thesis, which was equal distribution of the Nile water using John Raval theory of justice. And it so happened the guy who was doing the interview, two of them actually were Egyptians. And my name, I don't want to take you back, but my dad named me after an Egyptian diplomat in the 70s that he had from BBC. His name was Ismail Fahmi. And I met with some Egyptian students in University of Minnesota who thought that I was an Egyptian, and I told them, no, I'm an African Kenyan, to be specific. And those days there was no Google, so when I exited my name, it was called Exit, the app, I remember very well. It showed me Nabil Fahmi, and my name was Ismail Fahmi, and I ended up now calling my son Nabil Fahmi. Quite interestingly, they asked me, so brother Ismail Fahmi, you have an Egyptian name, so tell us, what was your conclusion about the Nile, equal distribution of the Nile, waters using John Rawls theory of justice? You can find it in University of Minnesota library. I said, brother, and I cannot hide about this. I said, it's redistribution. And I could see the Egyptian two guys who were interviewing me, their face changed. They were so mad at me, and I knew right there and then I'm not going to get that job. and I never did. But this is my point. This is my point. When you touch, going back to the two professors who spoke before me, when you touch on this topic, it's very sensitive. Very sensitive because I went to Egypt and I know what the Nile means for the Egyptians. And having researched a lot in this topic, I realized the investment that went into it and how it saved Egypt to where it is today. But that said, those agreements were done in 1800s. God forbid I was not even alive, and I don't even know my parents would know that I was going to exist. So the question, and this whole forum is for the students. Imagine an agreement that was done in 1800. Today, modern Sudan, modern Kenya, modern Burundi, modern Uganda, all these tributaries that are pouring to the Nile, they also want development. The population is growing. The leader in that country has to make a decision. That's why this thing is an educational discourse. I'm just trying to wake you up so that you understand some of the intricacies that a leader has to deal with. Your country needs investment. I want to develop. Egypt has developed. So Ethiopia came up with this dam. The other day, we were actually all holding our hat because we were told Egypt is going to bomb. The Great Renaissance Dam. And for the first time, Ethiopians, I was actually working for US government, and I had the opportunity to review the beginning of that dam. And being a mission environmental officer with USAID, guess what? I gave my 2 cents. I said, you're not going to use US government money to build that dam, but Ethiopians went out of their way to construct that dam anyway. And today, they have cheap electricity. They have cheap energy. Addis is lighting up. And we have the opportunity as a country, Kenya, with the neighbors, to also access that energy. But Ethiopia is actually going out of their way right now to come up with 3 more dams. Whether they're threatening, whether they're going to do it, we don't know. But that's the tense situation where we are. For the students who are here, for the professionals who are here who have studied the sector, you can imagine the tension that we are in. What will you have done? What will you have done differently? So, ladies and gentlemen, we can have this discussion. I just gave you the nitty, small bit anecdote of what is happening in my part of the world. And that is what I'm ready to have that conversation with the rest of the other participants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shai. For the students in the class, you need to come up with a solution to exactly that question for the and just kidding. Thank you so much. And there's definitely more to discuss there. I am going to now pass the microphone to Dr. Grace Oluwaseun, who is joining us from the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health. She is a phenomenal woman in many ways, including coming into her professional career in Nigeria in a career that was frankly a man's world. She's an accomplished author, and in fact, just today, Professor Grace, what's the name of your report that came out?
Water quality, a mirror and magnifier of structural inequalities.
We'll be promoting that on NU Water's LinkedIn. If you don't follow us, I suggest you do, if for no other reason than to get access to Grace's excellent report. Without further ado, I will pass it to you, Dr. Grace.
Let me try this.
That would be great.
Can everybody hear me? Yes. Yes, better? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Wow, it's now daunting to stand on the existing protocol and all the things we've had so far, but I'll share my thoughts anyway. On the transcript, I named it My Take. And I bring greetings from United Nations University, particularly from my director at the Institute of Water, Environment, and Health. So I'll be speaking briefly, and please pay attention to Sarah so that she won't be a bully. Shared waters, shared futures, practical solutions for transboundary water cooperation in Africa. Okay, let's see. I need to get this thing moving. Oh, okay, it's on here. Yeah. Are you sure? Okay. Sorry about that. So quite quickly, setting the scene, just to paint a picture, and I think I won't have to dwell on that because my predecessor did a good job in giving us a practical example of what the scenario is. But leveraging lessons from the front lines, 3 African case studies and the likes to move into the practical solutions that I think may be helpful at a time like this, and of course, what the urgent next steps should be. Okay.
Sorry about that. Technical issues. Okay, can everyone hear me? Yes or no? Yes. Yes? Okay. Sorry about that.
Had a bit of acronym this afternoon already. Thank you so much, Aaron, and the 2 professors that spoke earlier about conceptualizing, water in its essence beyond just the characteristics, the water science characteristics of water. So in Africa, the continent has 63 transboundary river basins covering over 60% of its landed area and providing at least 90% of all surface water resources. But one of the fundamental issues.
Grace, you're an extremely talented professor.
Hi.
Yeah.
Yeah, as it's not ideal, but maybe it's more audible. Okay.
So is it this one or this one? Hello. Hi. If you can hear me, say hi. All right, we'll get through this. One of the fundamental issues is governance. In fact, is the major denominator in in African water issue. We did what we called water security assessments, starting with Africa, actually, the premier one, and which informed the global water security assessment, the first one ever. And no African country is on a modest level on any of these standardized index. So these are some of the realities. And again, persistent leadership gap, I'll speak more on that, that gender issue is also very prominent. And of course, the multiple compounding systemic constraints, the climate shock in particular, how it's impacting all the existing. So now to move from problems to solution, I decided to just quickly dig into, these 3 African case studies, Chad, now, and Congo River Basin. And I'll move quickly through them. You can have the resources to, go over. I just wanted to know very quickly what's actually the major feature and what can we learn from it, because we've had our discussion this afternoon. Until you understand the problem, you may not be able to move towards any solution. So in terms of Lake Chad, which is very close to Nigeria, where I'm from, we've seen that river basin reduced in size significantly since the 1960s. In its heydays, it contributes to food security for about 50 million people. But right now, the size of one's 6th largest inland body of water on Earth is so ridiculously and unbelievably so small. Now, one of the issues is also a vicious cycle, Solution, yes, infrastructure, but over time, we also see that infrastructure is just half of the problem. Maintenance of that infrastructure is also an issue. So the key lesson in there is institutional frameworks alone cannot survive without sustained financing, strong member state buy-in, conflict sensitivity, and commitments to infrastructure maintenance, and governance must keep pace with the ecological and security dynamics of the basin. Now, the Nile issue. Thankfully, a lot of that has been done, but the key lesson in my little finding around that is political trust is built incrementally through technical cooperation, data sharing, and joint projects long before any formal legal frameworks, can be agreed upon. That's the major, lesson learned in that regard. And finally, Congo Basin, underutilized potential, is the 2nd largest river basin in the world after the Amazon. But has that potential been tapped? In 2026 of the 21st century, the answer is regrettably no. So the key lesson is a rich water endowment does not automatically equal water security or governance capacity. So early investment in governance determines whether basins become assets or flashpoints. Again, governance. Okay. A hidden front line of cooperation, I've had to ask that question in some of our activities already. That is transboundary aquifers. Most of the ones you've been talking about are just for surface waters, but we also have connecting, aquifers, that we're sitting upon. How much of a cooperation are going on in that regard? Well, to conclude the lesson learned, I also felt, okay, let's come to my host right now. And I picked on Colorado River. Sorry, that is not Chicago, a Great Lake in Chicago, but I felt it's a great example, 7 US states, 29 tribal nations, and 2 Mexican states, so arguably, the world's most instructive model of adaptive transboundary governance can be learned from there. And the transferable lessons in this is that durable institutions first, then transparency builds trust, and of course, inclusive multi-stakeholder engagement is also key. So from that evidence, I was able to come up with what I call an 8-agenda practical solution. And with each of them, also gave an example of a practical action under each point that we can leverage if we really want to put our money where our mouth is. They're mouthful, but I believe they're doable if we really put our mind to it. The only thing I would love to say that it's not captured on this is speaking now to my continent, to say one big thing that is lacking from where I'm standing is value for life. Permit me to conclude on that. I believe if we love each other a bit more, we will be able to act differently and help each other. I don't believe we do not have enough human capital resources to elevate the issues of Africa. But I think we just lack value for life, which should be translated, into helping each other. If half of what is spent on governance is invested in any of this core development, there will be significant changes, to our lifestyle, to the standard of living, and so on. So I'll leave you to munch on these 8-agenda practical solutions, and I hope that someday, somehow, it will be taken up and implemented, and hopefully see a better Africa, see a better transboundary cooperation. Thank you.
Students, 8 steps. You got this. Our next speaker is, we've known each other now for 10 years. It was like my first year that I was here as a professor that George Wells and others, we went to visit you in Israel. So this is Professor Noam Weisbrod, who is the Dean of the Blaustein Institutes for Desert Research. And I think I need glasses. That's what I think. He's a phenomenal person with a lot of administrative responsibilities and a wonderful research program. Noam.
Thank you. Yeah, to the other.
I think it would be useful for you to.
But no, I'll switch the presentation.
No, do you want to use this?
Maybe my voice is.
This one.
Yep, just. That's what work.
Wait, let me make sure that it's on Zoom.
Okay, there we go. Okay, thank you. So first of all, I would really like to thank the organizers, Ellie and Aaron and Sarah and Crystal and all the outstanding graduate students that are babysitting us in the last few days in an amazing way. It's really a great event. And I will very briefly try to speak about transboundary water in Israel and the Middle East. And I will start from saying, I'll change slide here. That doesn't work. What's the way to change slide here? I thought it's going to work. Just here. Okay.
Yes, I think you just do arrows.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So sorry about that. So I was start from saying a few words about water in general, because I think that a lot of our water is transboundary water, and we first need to agree about the importance of water. So water is the most crucial resource on Earth. We can't live without water. We won't have food without water, but it's a finite resource. And the demand for water is increasing all the time, continuously. And at the same time, I'm taking the liberty to say that we are destroying our water resources all the time, both in terms of quantity and in terms of quality. So the gap between what we need and what we actually have, or what is the available water, is just increasing all the time. So just to emphasize the level of the water scarcity or water crisis, this is a UN prediction that tells us that in less than 25 years, almost half of the world population will be living under water scarcity. Half of the world population, this is a lot of people that are going to live under water scarcity, and definitely it's something that we need to think about. And if this presentation was given, let's say 20 years ago, and we were talking about water scarcity, we were thinking about rural areas, developing countries, but this is not the case anymore. And actually having money, not having water, it's not my sentence, I took it from somewhere, has become a common problem. And we can see water issues, water scarcity everywhere, including the rich countries, industrial areas. It's not a problem of the poor areas anymore, or not only. Saying that, and although this presentation is not about rural areas and developing countries, these are some pictures from different trips that we are doing in sub-Saharan Africa in villages. And I don't think that you need to be a medical doctor or a hydrology professor to understand that the type of problems, the level of complexity is different than what we have here. If anyone in this room need to drink the water that this guy is fetching from the river, or this lady from the pond, I don't think that anyone would like to drink it. But this is what they have. So why we're facing such a catastrophe, like many other things in life, this is a superposition of a lot of issues. Just in short, we have the population growth, we have the drylands and desertification issues. More and more people are living in dryland, and larger areas of the world are becoming dry. Of course, the climate instability has a huge impact on water, and unfortunately, long-term inappropriate management of our water resources is a big problem as well. So let's now zoom in into the Middle East. So in general, the Middle East and North African countries, in opposed to the sub-Saharan African countries, the North African countries, is the world's most water scarce region by far. And it's also the most sensitive region for climate instability. So these two together just give us a hint, where are we at? And more than 80% of this region, the MENA country region, wastewater is not being treated at all. So this is a big problem. And if we talk about transboundary water, most of the water is actually shared water, and therefore there is a lot of dispute over water resources. To explain that, just a map about the withdrawal rate of water in this area. We see in most countries it's way over 100%, and actually now it's even much worse. This is like 8 years old map. So we are facing catastrophe almost everywhere. Some of these countries are rich enough to solve it with desalination, but not all of them. And desalination is not it's not a magic. There are some limitation to desalination as well. Now, we have told that water never really end up in wars. That's true, but a lot of almost in many places, and each one of these stars is a different story that could be a different presentation when Sarah is not in the room and we can talk. So I'm going to run fast. I'm just going to mention that when we're talking about groundwater in opposed to surface water, the quantitative analysis is way more complicated. It's not easy to really understand how the water is being shared. Now, if we zoom into Israel, I will just say that all the water resources of Israel, all the aquifers and the one surface water, which is the Sea of Galilee, are being shared with other countries, 100%. So this, of course, a major issue in Israel. Now, when I talk about water in many places around the world, I hear that Israel is a superpower in water. And I'm going to run fast because I don't have time. If we look on the consumption of water in Israel from the middle of the previous century till now, we see that we are now consuming less than 50% than what we used to, and this is mostly in agriculture. And the important thing about this slide is the fact that if this could be done in Israel, it can be done everywhere. I mean, it's not a miracle. It's just the right decisions, the right priorities, and the right technologies that are being used. That's it. And this is, I think, a very important message. Now, one of the things to get out of this water scarcity is to create new water. And we can do it either by treating wastewater and renew it. I don't see anything. And the second one is desalination. So we are reusing about 90% of our wastewater, and this is a big game changer because right now we are using 65% of our water in agriculture from treated wastewater. And if we go to desalination, and this is an old-time magazine cover, we will see that in Israel till 2004, if you wanted to drink seawater, you had to be a fish. Nowadays, 75% of our potable water is from desalination. There are 2 new desalination plants that are currently under construction, so the number will go up to 90%. And this, of course, is a huge game changer for various obvious reasons. So the last slide. I think that we all agree that water is really a precious commodity. And it's a scarce commodity and should be treated like a scarce commodity. It's also a very unstable commodity, very fragile commodity. So I think that everybody will agree that we do need to work together to explore this solution for water scarcity. But I think that Aaron was saying that in the first presentation, I think that we can make the water crisis an opportunity and not only think about it as a crisis. It's an opportunity for peace. It's an opportunity for cooperation, for innovation, for development, and especially the MENA countries that I mentioned that are in a real catastrophe should use it as really an opportunity. Now, last sentence is that I'm coming from the academia. I'm a hydrology professor, like some other in this room. And I think that we have learned that research is mandatory. Research is not something, it's not a luxury, I would say. And if we save on research, the results are usually very, very expensive and sometimes irreversible. So this is something that I think that worth remembering. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Professors are highly talented at many things. Time management. I'm sorry to be ruthless. I warned everyone I would be ruthless when it came to timekeeping. You have so much to say. Thank you very much. So for our last speaker before the panel, we have another example of a transboundary moment. We have someone who's coming to us from the University of Illinois at Chicago and Argonne. So there's an interesting transboundary there. And he has kindly let me introduce him as Professor AAA. He has a wonderful name that I hope he says himself. But for now, let's welcome Prof. AAA to the podium.
We're going to try a different mic to see it.
Let's try this one.
Is this supposed to work or no? Trying the blue one? Hello? No.
Go ahead.
Hello, hello? No. Hello, hello?
Okay, this is better. Okay, we've been hearing a lot about climate, so that is my expertise. So I was asked to offer some, solution based on climate perspective. And before I do that, let's look at some of the data. So yesterday I had asked one of my graduate students, like peak about 42 Earth system model, and let's see how some of the climate variables like temperature and precipitation is changing over time. So if you look at the figure on the left, this is the projected change in the surface temperature. And the stippling, the dot you see on the map, is grid point where at least 70% of the model agree that that change is going to occur. And if you look at, the entire North America, including the Mediterranean to also the Arabian countries, we could see that the expected change is almost 5 degrees Celsius. So theoretical understanding is that with warming, the ability of the atmosphere to hold more water vapor increase. But when you look at the precipitation, so this is the mean precipitation projections, and you will see that over the entire North America, North Africa and the Mediterranean, the expected change is very small and also highly uncertain. You see that there are fewer, stipplings. That is, fewer models agree on the expected change. It's not working. Now, when you look at the evolution, for example, of precipitation from the past, here we look at it from 1965 into the future, end of the 24th century. So even though we are seeing slight increases over, these are regional averages, you see that the uncertainty is extremely wide. So the implication of that is that even when, you tend to have wetting precipitation, there will be possible fling towards, flooding and drought. So another take-home message here is that when you look at the historical period, the stationarity assumption for which most of the Transboundary Treaty is based on is gone. You see that in recent time into the future, precipitation is becoming highly unpredictable. And that, goes into some of the solution, the climate-based solution. So the first I'm offering based on this data is instead of our historically fixed volume agreement, so we need to move towards a variable allocation. So an example of that is that if a river flow drops by 20% due to drought, then there should be a treaty that automatically trigger a proportional reduction for all party rather than winner takes all. So, and of course, before you do that, there has to also be data sharing, also transparency, among countries. So you have to build trust. And there are a lot of resources, out there that we can use. We can monitor, the available water, the groundwater using satellite. So NASA, for example, has this GRACE mission. We can also, use climate model to look at how precipitation is going to change under different scenarios, and we can make, our plans based on that. Yes. So another point I have here is also some of my work also involve looking at how renewable energy, solar, wind, the potential, how it's going to change in the future. So we could also develop what I call an interdependent, agreement in such a way that, countries that have higher potential of renewable energy, like Jordan, they have higher, solar energy potential. They could provide energy in exchange for, desalinated, water, which coastal countries like Israel, have that technology in abundance. So then you have some sort of, water energy exchange nexus. So the third, of course, is that as we move into the future, the input for the atmosphere is reducing and highly uncertain. We could also implement, smart agriculture irrigation techniques to, reduce a lot of wastage that we have. So another take-home message here is that Aside from, the precipitation, if you look at the surface evaporation, which is directly tied to the warming, we could also see increasing, evaporation. So the implication of that is that most of the open, dams, we are going to lose a lot of water, in that context. So I am suggesting, strong need for subsurface, dam, and also increasing technology to artificially, recharge our aquifer. So I thank you for your audience.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to pass the moderation and the timekeeping responsibilities to this heavy hitter. And if we could ask the speakers to please come to the front table.
Yeah, why don't all the speakers come on up? Ishmael, you coming up too? Good, good. And we can throw down because I was the U.S. diplomat that Secretary Clinton sent to Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan to stop that war. And we can talk about that. So no, please come on up. All the speakers come on up. Look, I can talk, as you can tell, this is not a subject you can do in 7-minute bits. And with due respect to Sarah, this is not something you can squeeze into a short period of time. Lots of different angles and dimensions associated with this, not just around the science, but the complications of dealing with these types of problems politically. So please, I could go on and ask all sorts of questions, but I want to see hands going up. If you have questions for the speakers, I will defer to you guys first before I start asking away. Otherwise, it'll be back to me. Okay, so let's start back.
Your arm shot.
Yeah, okay, no, that's good. That's good to hear. And I'm going to go all the way back as you were first. I don't know if this microphone, okay, now it seems to work. Okay, go ahead. Say your name first and then go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you to the panelists. My name is Junius. I'm PhD student, communication studies here. And I want to ask, if you're in the discussion of transboundary water issues, the Israel-Palestinian case is the most urgent example. Last week, Doctors Without Borders released the report that Israel is using water as a weapon. And I want to ask, in cases where, in addition to climate issues, war, conflict is a cause for water issues, what should the gathering of scholars like this, what statement, what conversation can we produce that can cause a change in that direction?
Noam, you want to try to take that one on first?
Yeah, I guess it's for me. First of all, I want to emphasize that I'm not my government, and not everything that is being done is, the way I think it should be done. But generally speaking, I need to say that the water committees that are discussing water issues between Israel and the Palestinian Authority are working all the time, even when the conflict is in peak. This is all under the radar. It's not something that you will see in the news. In the news, you see only the bad things. That's the way that news work. But I think that this the water issues is a good example. I wouldn't say that there is a complete agreement, no. But there are a lot of efforts all the time to do things better. It is complicated because, Israel complained that the Palestinians are contaminating because they are controlling many of the water resources. And the Palestinians are complaining that they don't get enough water and so on and so forth. I'm not here to judge who is right and who is wrong. Everybody is right. But it's a very complicated situation. And I think that this is a good example how the water issue is much, much better than any other issues in terms of discussion and collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of important points here. One is, and I think the point that you're making is make sure you contextualize what you're hearing. There is a broad set of cooperation that goes on between Israel and its partner countries that is extraordinarily complex and very robust. And so while you hear some of these things, make sure you contextualize it with that background. The other, and Ishmael, I'm going to turn to you as the international water lawyer, there are legal things we have to say about conflicts that involve water, aren't there? And what do we say about targeting water infrastructure?
You said, and I heard you very clearly that you are a diplomat.
But yes, so you're a former diplomat. I am an active diplomat and I still hold a red passport, I can tell you that.
So he has to be careful about what he says.
Exactly. And even if this is an academic setting, because seriously, that's why it was a rhetorical question that I threw at the students to do some sort of critical thinking on that subject, because tomorrow anything can happen between Egypt and Ethiopia. They're my neighbors. As a diplomat, I can be called upon to come and actually arbitrate. And I have done negotiations, and actually was taught by the best, Professor Saskainen from Yale. So I really will not say anything about that subject other than telling you what the issues are. And I would like students to come up with, use your critical thinking, from a village in the middle of nowhere who don't know what is going to happen because they don't know what the Nile Basin is, and she's being told that she cannot have a project in, the Rift of what is it called, the Victoria side of Kenya, or in Burundi where there's a tributary. So you can imagine what an average citizen will go through. But it's us at our level to come up with some sort of consensus and show everybody their partner, the best alternative to their negotiation, to walk away and say, we are all winners. We all need this water together. We are all humans and we should all get along. Thank you.
And just to close out, there are international conventions that prohibit the targeting of water infrastructure in times of conflict. But just don't think about that. Also think about places like Ukraine, where there's been a lot of ordnance exchanged. That can have a huge impact on water resource in ways that we often don't talk about. And that's something to think about.
The mic.
I don't even know if it goes on. Does it? Does it? Does
Yeah.
it?
Yeah,
Did it?
better, yeah.
Did it? Is that
That's it.
better?
That's better.
Okay. All right. So that's better. So let's turn back over to here. And we're still going to argue about this Nile stuff.
Thank you. My name is Valerie, and I am a third-year student here studying data science and computer science. So in that field of technology, as countries modernize technologically with expanding data infrastructure, industries, energy systems, we see that water demand is increasing. And one of the speakers talked about the demand supply issue. And this is in addition to a lot of countries dealing with population growth, urban expansion. And we see that the water systems are being stretched in multiple ways simultaneously. And I am curious, how are we thinking, or how are you guys thinking about balancing technological development with long-term water sustainability?
And actually, I think that's both Grace and Prof. I think you both could opine on that. You from the impact of these things, but maybe a little bit about what can technology, how are we going to be able to use technology coming forward to address some of these complicated challenges? Are there opportunities as well as some of the negative downsides? Sorry, this doesn't seem to be working as well as that one. Try that one.
Hello, okay, it's working. One of the slides that I didn't have the opportunity to share, I called it Phased Pathways for Translating Cooperation into Results. So the 8 agenda solution that I put forward, I splitted them into how we can phase them out in terms of cooperation sequencing in the near term, in the medium term, and in the long term. So under the near term, I have prioritized trust building measures. And the action points under that, the first one is actually open data platform. Because leveraging AI and the modern technology, there's actually a lot, significant progress, that we can leverage, especially in Africa, maybe more than the other region, right now. So technological solutions, data-driven solutions are now available, so we could leverage that, importantly. Another thing, joint early warning systems, is also part of, the data solution, Another thing that I put in there that I also didn't have the chance to talk about is build gender commitments within basin secretariats, and rapid national capacity strengthening. Capacity strengthening as also, at least from African region, will always also be around these, data-driven, AI-driven technology to help, in the near term to strengthen capacity and move things forward in terms of cooperation and things like that. But I'll allow you to say.
Okay, my perspective to this, when you look at different, regions, the way you have the issue can be relative. So, for example, if you narrow down to Nigeria, it almost rains every day. And when you look at some of those dams, they tend to store the excess water. And at the point they release the dam, and then the water floods almost, all the downstreams. So my suggestion to that would be, of course, it's going to be expensive. There are also, some other civil engineering, concern is having other sub dams that could be a storage. So for example, when you have excess, rain for years, you could have a sequence of 3, 4, 5 years where the precipitation is above normal. So it tends to rain, then you can store in those storage dams. And years when you have deficits, when you have droughts, you can release out from those sub-storage and then use. Rather than, whatever you have and that is excess, then you tend to release, and then waste it over time. Now, in many regions that are having, these challenges, this issue. So some of the things I suggested is, in Nigeria, we call it trade by barter. So for countries along the coastal, region that have access to ocean water, and also they have the technology to desalinate, this ocean water. If you have, renewable energy potential or solar energy potential in your country, you could offer, because desalination also requires a lot of energy. So you could offer your energy, to those countries in exchange for, desalinated water. And then you build this, treaty over time with the consideration of the climate change based on the data that I shared. So, and for the first question, in terms of, the problem of countries honoring agreement, especially in the face of, issues that we have around the world. Maybe the extreme case is when those treaties are made, of course, in recent time, you could put a portion of your, natural resources, whether gold, in those countries, and any country that weaponizes those resources, then you have your resources at stake, to be taken over. Maybe people will honor that when their money or their resources is involved. The diplomats.
Actually, I just want to chime in because that's a very good question. By the way, what did you say your name is? Valerie. Valerie, thank you so much. That was a very good question. I just wanted to check the YouTube. At one point, I was a CEO, and I want us to be very practical on this. Scientists can tell you about what they can do, policymakers will tell you, but it starts with me and you. And we were celebrating the World Water Day. So I went to a comedy club in Nairobi, and I said, let's joke about water. And that's how practical I get. So, the comedian did not do very well. So I tried. You can see it in YouTube, Churchill Show in Kenya, you'll see it. It was daring because everybody celebrates World Water Day in different ways. Growing up, I will take a bucket of water in my village. I know the amount of soap I will put in my body. And I will know how that amount of water I will use to rinse. Look at this lifestyle now. It's not even an American thing anymore. Even back home, we got shampoo, conditioner, shower gel. Okay, all those things need water. So it's a high time that we put a clock on ourselves as human beings. Water is not finite. Water is scarce. How we manage water in our lives really make. So there are even technologies, as Prof was saying here, that you can put in the shower 5 minutes. You are shouting to your kid to come out of the bathroom. Get out of the bathroom. No, let the water lock itself after 5 minutes. And let them rush to you and say, Mommy, can you reset the, So I'm just suggesting practical ways that we can conserve water, whether in this part of the world, with what you call it, the land of plenty, but also the land of scarcity. We also need to do better in the Middle East and Africa. Thank you.
So don't blame the data centers, right?
Hello, I'm Ariana Blake. I'm a second year undergraduate environmental engineering and computer science student. I was wondering how can we work together to create some delegation and strategies between governments to create valuable collaboration and navigate power imbalances of wealth and water to create meaningful connections between countries that last and are substantial.
Okay, well, I'm going to answer this one first, and I'm going to turn it over to you, just in case. Sorry, I just co-published a book with Larry, was one of our authors, on hydrodiplomacy and how you do exactly that. How do you work with countries to build a cooperative environment? How do you overcome political intransigence? How do you integrate knowledge, technology, and information into those discussions? So anybody who is interested, I'll leave a stack of the cards out there, but you're welcome to do it. Okay, so how do you stimulate what Noam is going, no?
No, a few things. First of all, I have to say something for the previous question of Valerie, if I may.
Please.
I think that if we treat water, which is basically what you're saying, as a scarce commodity, everything will be different, because when you need to go somewhere and you need to fill gas in your car, you think two times because it costs money. You don't know if you have enough to go, I don't know, to the beach. I don't know, not to the beach here, somewhere far away. You think about it. And when you use water, you don't think about it. And this may be one of the biggest problems. And this is the same with agriculture. I mean, US is a great example because of these water rights and stuff that you're in many places, people still do not use drip irrigation, which is very, very basic way to save water, but you don't want to use less water because you will lose your water rights. So you just do furrow irrigation, which is just crazy. I mean, it's like 2026. It's like in the 2 centuries back, but it's so. I mean, really, if the understanding will that water is a scarce commodity, most countries can save a lot of water. That's one thing. Now, about your question, I think that it is being done. I mean, in many countries, I think that a lot of smart people. We have people that do diplomacy here. I'm just a simple scientist, but there are a lot of efforts to work together, and I think that there is a general understanding that the way to go over water misunderstanding, dispute, and deal with share water resources that in many places, I mean, like in the many countries, it's like 80% of the water is shared. So we have to work together. These delegations, these groups that work and sit and speak and try to quantify, and there are a lot of, I mean, from the academic side of view, I can tell you that there is a lot of models that are being developed how to evaluate where the water is coming from. In rivers, it's easy, but in the subsurface, it's very complicated. So we, as scientists, do the maximum, and then the people that do diplomacy try to solve it, because as Aaron said before, I mean, we don't want to really fight about water. We want it to be like a tool for peace, and I think that it's not perfect. Nothing is perfect, but this is the direction.
One more thought, Aaron. I want to probably create an awareness that right now we're actually in this era of global water bankruptcy. You know, is anyone familiar with that terminology yet? Water bankruptcy. There is a report published in January this year, interestingly, by my director, and using the analogy, of deficit, and all that, and a lot of science went into that to really show us that we're no longer in the era of water crisis or just simple water scarcity. We have passed the era of water scarcity. So we need to wake up to the current status of, global water bankruptcy. And the example of Lake Chad that I talked about is a critical example of how we've actually passed the era of just simple water crisis. So it's no longer crisis. So it's important for us to know that so that we can also lean our solutions towards, where we find ourselves in a state of irrecoverable, hydrological resources is no longer business as usual. So we need to take this water issue very seriously, right from each person's doorstep. Again, I'll allude to the fact that we're all water users. So because we're all water users, it makes everyone, an actor in this regard. So I just want to put that out there. The report is available on unu.edu, publications, Global Water Bankruptcy, or just Google it. It's downloadable with free access. You can, have a good read, to have more understanding. Thank you.
Sarah, how much time do we have? I just want to check.
Well, everyone's already mad at me, so if I say time is more or less.
No worries then. There's another question.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Jared. I'm also a student, first year from Performance Studies Department. My question is directed to the Kenyan delegates. I'm from Nairobi originally, like from last year. I come from a place we call Tempo. Tempo is situated at the meeting point of Madare River and Nairobi River. On the other side is the Dandora dam site, and also like barely 10 minutes away is also like the Dandora waterfall. So Tempo is like the birthplace of the Kenyan Ukofulani hip hop, and it's also like the birthplace of many Kenyan artists from the Eastlands. So this is why it's very, very, very much dear to our heart. The thing that I probably would want to put across is this, the river regeneration project by the government, and also the idea of building these green spaces around the Nairobi River riparian spaces. It started with the Kamkunji, which is almost going to be done. And now the next step should be Tempo. So the reason why I'm raising this up is also because Tempo is also under threat of land grabbers. And it's also one of the places that we've been talking with the Nairobi Rivers Commission so that it can be gazetted, so that the land grabbers cannot like take advantage of it. I was the chairman of that space before I came. And I want to take this opportunity so that to address this to you, maybe if in your capacity, you can also like somehow fast track this gazetting of the space, because without this, it will actually be, it's going to be taken. This is for sure, because I come from the community, and Tempo serves the community of Dandora, it serves the community of Korogosho, it serves the community of Lakisama, and it also serves the community of Gomongo. So it serves youth, young people from large area of Nairobi's Eastland. This is what I would want to do.
So do people know what land grabbing is and what's happening? Because now in a lot of places in Africa, other countries are coming in and leasing long-term, like 99 years, tracts of land so that they can produce food and ensure their own food security. So that water gets used there and it gets exported out. And so you can imagine if countries like Sudan or Ethiopia are engaging in this practice, and that other country is benefiting from the water resources there, well, who actually owns that water? And do they have the right to do that if that water actually can flow downstream to an adjacent country or an adjacent community? So now you've got a very interesting transboundary dynamic where countries who are not even inside the basin could be part of that complexity. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I'm standing up for you because not only you are a Kenyan citizen, but I need your vote. So I'm giving you that respect, number one. Two, I've realized that you have your facts right, that the president has taken the initiative with Nairobi River Commission, and the process is ongoing. I'm one believer that we need to institutionalize that process. You remember the late Minister Michuki started that process, but it was an individual, thing. It was not institutionalized. People were scared of that minister. But what we're doing right now is trying to incentivize, create that space. And please, before I leave this place, because I'll be leaving on the 10th, tomorrow I'm going to Washington. So I need something in writing from you. That way you will hear back from the government that we are going to address that concern of land grabbing, because that for me is what took it. So with that, hopefully you'll give us another 5 years to serve you better. Thank you so much.
Always vote the water platform. Okay, you've got 30 seconds. If there's anything that you want to close with, I'm stalling for a second so I can give you a second to think about what you want to use those 30 seconds for. I'm walking very slowly and I'm going to start at this end and go down, but maybe I'll start with you.
I just want to thank again to Sarah, to Ellie, to Aaron, to the great undergrad students and graduate students that were taking care of us. It's been a really, really nice event. I think it's also a very important topic. We could probably, and I think that everybody understands it, we could talk about things for hours and hours and hours. Everything was really on a glimpse, really just highlights. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat what my colleague and scholar said about this, but again, when I come to this forum, I like challenging students. There's one thing, and I think I wrote a paper on it from my faith angle. If you don't believe in God, you believe in something, for heaven's sake. If you don't believe in anything, you believe in ethics. So I just want to challenge anybody in academia to look at religion and water. Somebody was asking for what solution can we provide? If you believe in God, then what does God say about water? I know in the Bible, he mentions 47 times. I know in the Quran, it's 50 something times. Okay, what about ethics? So let us explore that angle. That way we can save this resource.
For those of you who are interested in that, I encourage you to look up Aaron Wolf's work. He spent a lot of time in the Middle East looking at the spirituality around water and the interconnection between water and religion. Sorry to interrupt, Grace, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll seize the opportunity. Thank you everyone for having me and for listening. But I'll seize the opportunity to flag one of the points that I didn't have the chance to. That's gender leadership in water diplomacy. The picture of a late Kenyan, interestingly, Wangari, Nobel laureate, has this famous quote: the higher you go, the fewer women there are. In maybe 2 decades, 3 decades ago, you don't have women enough in STEM or who are qualified, but that story, has changed. So running through all the solutions, a particular thread is explicit. The people making decisions about, in particular, Africa's water matter as much as the technical quality of those decisions. Analysis still shows that. I wrote a policy brief on women in African water leadership. And one of the major findings is that it's only one woman that is the head of a Transboundary water organization in the whole of Africa. That's a huge gap. So, the director of, it's been, but it's still just one out of many. So, I'll flip it, positive narration, positive framing, that is a huge opportunity for improvement. So, addressing the leadership ceiling in transboundary water institutions, those structural barriers of cultural norms, inflexible employment practices, and absent mentorship that prevents qualified women from rising is not separate from solving our water issues. It is actually part of solving it. So let's incorporate this. Thank you.
So we're in an era where, they believe in climate change, especially at a higher up, it's becoming a problem. even though I'm a young person, but I've been doing this for 20 years. So climate change is real and is a risk multiplier. So I would strongly suggest that the future solution, future agreements should take into consideration how this is changing, in a way to get things right. Thank you.
I'm only going to add just one quick positive note, which is I've been in Africa back and forth 4 times in the last month, and so I spent a lot of time there and in the Middle East. And what I will say is that it is remarkable to see the engagement of Africans on these issues and the conversations that are happening among these countries about advancing cooperation and developing institutions, identifying technologies that can help support them, understanding how their own growth is going to impact water resources is actually inspiring. And so while we're talking about a lot of the challenges, I really do want to highlight that in many respects, Africa is demonstrating a way forward for a lot of other places in the world about how you think and internalize and integrate water into your everyday life. And so it really is inspiring. So maybe back to you.
It's with this, I have to thank the panelists and beg for forgiveness for cutting everyone short. With that, we should go forth and prosper. Thank you for staying an extra 10 minutes, and we deeply appreciate your commitments to water. Thank you.